I have two different screens because I'm going to go back and forth between the two of them. We are going to concentrate on filling in the unit circle. So on the left screen, you should have this piece of paper. Hopefully you're able to print it out. Let's fill in the obvious ones. It's where the unit circle crosses the x-axis and the y-axis. So this point right here, because the unit circle has a radius of 1, this point would be at 1, 0. This point would be at 0, 1. This is -1, 0. And down here is 0, -1. Okay. So it's like two circles that are within this unit circle, which is why I have the circles over here on the right side. So if you can get another piece of paper or in your spiral, I'm going to draw both of them and then combine them on the one on the left. So here we go. For the circle on the right, the top one, I'm going to break it into 30-degree segments. So it might take me a little bit to try to get this to look pretty good, and it's not going to be perfect. All right. So I'm trying to break it into 30 degrees, every single one. Okay. So what I'm trying to say is this would be 30, 60, 90, 120, 150, and then this would go to 180. So for each of these, if that makes sense. Okay. All right. So that being said, you don't have to write those in there. When you want to fill out and I'm going to teach you tricks to go fast, but I just want to try to explain it in more detail at the beginning. So we already talked about some of this, and you saw some of it on your homework. If we were to go from the origin to this point and draw down, and therefore this is a right triangle, this would have a radius of 1, which is the hypotenuse of 1. And because I said that this was 30 degrees, this is a 30, 60, 90 triangle. So if we have 1 there, 1 is equal to 2s. Therefore, across from the 30 degrees is equal to s. S is equal to 1/2. So this would be 1/2. And then across from the 60 degrees, which would be down here on your x-axis, that would be s root 3, which is the square root of 3 over 2. Okay. Now, if we were to look at, so over here on the left side, if we were to look at this, our 30 degrees is right here. And actually, let's do that in red. So this is 30 degrees. Right here would be your 60 degrees, and this would be 90 degrees. Okay, so if we were going to do this, the coordinates of this point right here, your x is root 3 over 2. And your y is 1/2, because that's the y coordinate, comma, 1/2. Okay, so now let's concentrate on the 60 degrees. So if I have a point here and I drop down, I have a right angle. This is 60 degrees. This is 30. We know the hypotenuse is 1 because that's the radius of the circle. Then across from 30 would be just s. So the x-axis would be 1/2. And then the y-axis would be across from 60, which is root 3 over 2. Over here, that would be this point right here. So our right here. So to get to this point, it's x comma y. Well, the x in this case is 1/2, and the y is root 3 over 2. Okay. Now, for a unit, well, let's continue really quickly. So for this other shape on the bottom, on the right side, let's make this into 45-degree angles. So if I did 45-degree angles, I only need to cut this side once and then this side. So we have 45. Then this goes to 90. And then you have that 135 and then 180 and so forth. Okay, so let's erase that. Okay, if this was a 45 degree triangle, so if I had my point here and I drop down to make a triangle, I know this is 45 degrees. If that's a 90 degree, this must be 45 degrees. The hypotenuse, which is the radius, is 1. And then if 1 is equal to in a 90 degree triangle, the hypotenuse is equal to s root 2. So to get s alone, the two sides, we divide by root 2, divide by root 2. Can't leave that in the denominator. So we end up with s equaling root 2 over 2, which you've seen. We did this on the notes from a couple days ago. Okay, so the point would be root 2 over 2, comma, root 2 over 2. So let's draw that over on the unit circle. Root 2 over 2, root 2 over 2. All right. I wanted you to see that on the right side to understand where we're getting these values. And this is 45 degrees. I think it's easier to see the two different circles, one being by 30s and the other being by 45s. Now there is a trick to the unit circle. If you wanted to get this down quickly, memorize this part. When you look over here, okay, think of everything goes over 2. So over 2, over 2, over 2. Everything, every x, every y. Oh, yes, it does. And then it's 1, 2, 3. And then it's backwards. 1, 2, 3. And on the numerator, they're all square roots. For 1, well, the square root of 1 is just 1, so we don't need the square root symbol. Oh, square root of 2, square root of 3. Again, square root of 1 is just 1, so we don't need that symbol there. Square root of 2, square root of 3. So that's a simple to memorize it that way. Okay, if we go to the left side of the unit circle, with the degrees, we would have, there's 30 degrees, so 120, 150, and then 180. This in the middle would be 90 plus 45, 135 degrees. So for here, let's just concentrate on the multiples of 30. So we would end up, if you have this, well, let's do it on here so I don't make it messier. If I drop this down, your reference angle would be 60 degrees. So it would just be a mirror image. This would be root 3 over 2. This would be 1/2, and it's negative. Well, let's not even deal with that right now, but it is negative, and this is the 1. Okay, so for our x value, it would be 1/2 and then root 3 over 2. And what you have to realize is that in quadrant 2, every x value is going to be negative and every y value will end up being positive. Okay, so then for this one, for a 45, 90 triangle, it's just root 2 over 2 for both the sides. And you just have to figure out which one is negative, which one's positive. And then for this last one, point here, so make that into a right triangle. There's your angle. Your reference angle would be 30 degrees. So the 1/2 is here. And then this would be root 3 over 2. Okay, so your x value would be negative root 3 over 2. And your y value would be 1/2, positive 1/2. Okay, now for the bottom of the circle. We're not going to go through all the details in regards to, I know that you can understand if we drew a right triangle here, okay, the reference angle would be 30, okay, then that's 1/2, and this is root 3 over 2. Everything in the second or the third quadrant would be a negative x, and a negative y, everything. But a nice way to do this quickly, so that way you should do it if you don't remember how to get the numbers. But if you have your numbers in your first quadrant, what's nice is if you were to take this point and draw a straight line across, those are going to be the same points over here, only both negative. So we'll have negative 1/2 for x, and we'll have negative √3/2 for y. And for this one, it'll just be across from that. So let's draw. We have negative √2/2, negative √2/2. And then our last one will be across from here. So our x value is negative √3/2, comma, negative 1/2. Okay, let's throw our degrees in. So 180, let's get rid of these 3 lines. 180 plus 30 is 210, and then plus another 30 is 240, and then we have 270 degrees right there. Let's just continue with the 30 degrees. So this one would be 300 degrees, and this would be 330 degrees. This right here is 0 degrees, or it would be 360 degrees. Now for the 45 degree angles, if we have 180 plus 45 degrees, you get 225. And then 270 plus your 45 degrees, you're going to end up with 315 degrees. Okay. So let's fill in the terminal points for the quadrant 4. Quadrant 4, your x values will all be positive, but your y values will all be negative. And then same deal. The 2 coordinates there will be the same as those, only different sides. The 2 coordinates there will be the same as those ones. We'll do green. 2 coordinates here will be the same as those. So let's fill them in. We have 1/2, positive 1/2, comma, negative √3/2, √2/2, negative √2/2, and then finally √3/2, comma, negative 1/2. All right, make sure we have the negative sign there. All right, now we're almost done. That's your unit circle. We have these other lines that we're not entirely sure about. What are those? Those lines are for radians, okay? Oh, and I didn't realize this line right here, I think, is for 360 degrees. I don't need that. Okay, the other lines, though, are for radians. So I've erased everything on the circles to the right because I want to talk radians. So what you need to know is if we start here, if we go all the way 180 degrees over, that's going to be a measurement of pi, which would make the whole entire circle a measurement of 2 pi. Okay, lovely. Now, I really want to concentrate on just the fact that from the initial point to 180 degrees, it is a unit of pi. So if I know that, what you can think of is, okay, I'm divided into 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 equal parts. If I'm divided into 6 equal parts, then each of them is a sixth. So this would be pi over 6. And this would be 2 pi over 6. We don't leave it that way though. This would be 3 pi over 6. Again, we need to simplify it. 4 pi over 6, 5 pi over 6, and this would be 6 pi over 6. Now, we're not going to leave it like that because we have to simplify all these. So pi over 6 would stay. This would turn into pi over 3, and this would turn into pi over 2. And this would be 2 pi over 3. This would be our 5 pi over 6, and this turns into just pi. So let's write that over here on our unit circle. So for this one, we have pi over 6. Here we have pi over 3. Oh, I'm so sorry. That we'll deal with in a second. That's our 45-degree circle, which we're not dealing with yet. Pi over 3 is here. And then here we have pi over 2. And right here we have 2 pi over 3. Skip that one because that's part of the 45-degree triangle. And here we have 5 pi over 6. And this is just pi. Now, if we continue this, let's go back to the right side. We're going to continue it just by adding. So if we start with this was 6 pi over 6. Let's do 7 pi over 6, 8 pi over 6, 9 pi over 6, 10 pi over 6, 11 pi over 6, and this would be 12 pi over 6. In the simplified versions, well, 7 pi over 6 stays that way. This goes to 4 pi over 3. This one goes to, what do we have, 3 pi over 2. This one goes to 5 pi over 3. This one stays, and this one goes to 2 pi. So let's write those in on the left side. So we have pi is already there. Then we have 7 pi over 6. So this would be 4/3 pi here. And this would be 3/2 pi. And if you think about it, this is 1 pi, this is 2 pi. So this is 3/2, 1.5 pi. Okay. And then we end up here with 5/3 pi. Skip that one, 11/6 pi, and then just 2 pi. I mean, here we start at 0. Now, back to the right. Here we have our 45 degrees. If this is pi, well, I'm sorry, this is 0, and this is pi, well, we split this into fourths. So this would be 1/4 pi, so pi over 4. And this would be 2 pi over 4, and this would be 3 pi over 4. 4 pi over 4, 5 pi over 4, 6 pi over 4, 7 pi over 4, and here we get 8 pi over 4. Let's simplify all of these. Pi over 4, or 1/4 pi, stays. This is pi over 2. This stays. This turns to pi. This stays. This is 3/2 pi. Oh, we already have that there. And then this stays. This goes to 2 pi. So even the ones that we already have filled in, they're the same. So what I mean by that, 2 pi, 2 pi, whether it's the 45-degree circle or the 30, 60, 90 circle. Here we have pi over 2. Yep, that's what we had. Here we have pi, and then 3/2 pi, 3/2 pi. All right, so let's fill the other information in on this circle to the left. So over here, we have pi over 4. This one is pi over 2. It's already there. Then we have 3/4 pi, 3/4 pi, and a couple more to fill in. 5/4 pi. And the last one is 7/4 pi. Okay. I hope this helps you with understanding the unit circle. What I would like for you now, but it'll be just a blank unit circle that I want you to try to fill in on your own. Obviously, I don't want the notes that we just took to be right next to you and you just copying mindlessly like the numbers. I want you to try to fill in the unit circle as much as you can on your own. If you get stuck, you can take a peek at the answers that we just did, but try to understand it and eventually you can see the patterns in it as well. I have also uploaded on Google Classroom a list of things that you can do over spring break if you would like to do them. They are optional, but if you're bored and you need some math challenges or some math games, there's a list on that on Google Classroom. All right, this concludes your notes.